I'm going to go back to the United States and go to the Revolutionary Party. That's the main lesson. That's what we need. I think when I was younger and I started to study this idea of, I started to really, I was politicized as a result of being from a working class background and being from an anti-imperialist family. But as studying left politics was something I started to do later in life. And it was something when people discussed this idea of revolution and the Revolutionary Party with me, it was extremely abstract. And in the United States, left politics is not known well. It's not really respected. It was very, my reaction would always be, what are you talking about? There's no revolution coming. There's no revolution coming. But in fact, in some ways, in some manifestations, an uprising has come. And for many people in Egypt, a revolutionary process has come. And the lesson is, people were not ready. I don't know if we can reach the same dynamics or factors in a place like the United States, or the same point of spontaneity or where all these variables coming together. But one thing Egypt has told me that if it happens in my lifetime, then I'm going to do everything I can to be ready. And sometimes, we can discuss whether that means creating a party or creating a political alternative. But that's the number one lesson. I think the lesson of counter-revolution is one that we've seen before. It's a lesson from the West. Our society is much more fluid than you think it is. And also less divided than you think it is.
हमास और हिजबुल्लाह का जो वहाँ है, वहाँ के आम लोगों में हमास और हिजबुल्लाह के प्रति क्या रिलेशन है, और जो वहाँ की मुस्लिम ब्रदरहुड पार्टी है वो किस तरह से हमास और हिजबुल्लाह को देखती है, और जो दूसरी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी है वो किस तरह से इसको देखती है?
What is the relationship of perception of the people towards organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, and what is the kind of relationship that Muslim Brotherhood has with those two particular groups?
Well, the Brotherhood had, I guess a good relationship with Hamas. They, actually under the behest of the United States, they negotiated a peace treaty between Hamas and Israel the last time that Israel began bombing Gaza. We didn't really have enough time to see where this relationship with Brotherhood and Hamas would go. The Brotherhood was flooding the tunnels that lead to Gaza. So it wasn't completely, completely a good relationship. But right now, the emergence of this people, this population of Egyptians who went on the streets the liberal elements went on the streets to oust Morsi and the elite elements, they're now using extreme sort of rhetoric against Palestinians and against Syrians and against Iraqis, because they're sort of making that claim that the Brotherhood is part of this conspiracy of Sunni Islamic politicians who are trying to gain influence here, gain influence there, and they actually are accusing Hamas, not just the people, but the government. The court in Egypt about a month ago ruled that, during the beginning of the uprising, one of the things that happened was that many of the, in the 30 years of Mubarak, starting with Sadat and Nasser, not only were the leftists in prison, but the Muslim Brotherhood members, the Salafi members, people belonging to political Islamic organizations were often imprisoned by Nasser Sadat and Mubarak, and they have been, really sort of victim in Egypt, the victimized dissent against the regime in Egypt for a very long time. And when the uprising against Mubarak began, many of their leaders were still in prison, and they were released by the army when the uprising began, and sort of succeeding the uprising as well. And Morsi was in prison in I believe, in the Sinai when the uprising began, and he was broken out of prison along with a lot of his other sort of jailmates or cellmates. And Hamas is being accused of facilitating that jailbreak that happened in 2011. And so there's a lot of, at this moment, there's a lot of anti-Hamas sentiment coming from this new government and from this sort of reactionary force of people that's emerged since June 30th. As far as Hezbollah, there hasn't been much public discussion about it, but Parliament is definitely part of this Sunni camp supporting Syrian rebels. Hezbollah is shaping up to be an enemy to the Syrian rebels. The kind of opposite of that Sunni camp because it's Shia movement.
Informalized worker are more in number than formalized ones. And also when talk of later the rural Egypt becoming part of it. So, and also the neoliberal policies, so how does it affect the rural part of Egypt? Does it affect in the same way like in our country, land acquisition and this laborers and so on and so forth?
Yes, starting with the question of the peasants. No representation of the revolutionary force has been able to come to power. So there's been no policy sort of attempting to do any kind of land reform that would be supportive of the peasants. But they have been part of sort of the latest stage and trend of the revolution against Morsi. And that's because they're finding, they're increasingly angry over the same conditions that have been taking place. And, a lot of sectarian violence that has come about as a result of kind of the more reactionary elements of the Brotherhood is manifesting itself in a lot of these rural areas, actually. In your first question about the makeup of the working class, there's actually, so the informal sector is quite large. It's increasingly becoming the majority of the workforce, like in the Indian industrial sector. I don't have many statistics. And by informal sector, I mean temporary workers in the industrial sector, and then other sort of informal jobs like street vendors, domestic servants, and in sort of insane categories where there's sort of millions of as well. And then you have like special economic zones in India. You have special qualified zones in Egypt. And this is another thing, the special qualified zones. This reflects the U.S. imperialism. The special qualified zones that were created in Egypt, any business who wants to qualify to open up in special qualified zone has to agree to purchase, I think it's about 25% of their raw materials from the state of Israel. And under Morsi, that he had planned to expand the special qualified zones, even with that stipulation that businesses in these SEZs or SQZs have to sort of do a certain level of business with Israel. And this sort of reflects that U.S. imperialist relationship with Egypt. Like they were able to sort of mandate that that be a stipulation of the special qualified zones in Egypt. It's quite ridiculous, actually. Does that answer the question? I mean, the workers in these special qualified zones, they're really, a lot of them are invisible. There's a lot of work that has to be done to find out who they are and what's going on.
आशु के सवाल मारुति स्ट्रगल के बारे में सुजन ने कहा कि उनका जो भी उन्होंने देखा है वो एक बाहर के लोगों के नजरिए से देखा है। लेकिन कहने का मतलब ये है कि सुजुकी में 3 चीजें जो मेरे समझ में जितना पहले पहली की जो यहाँ का जो डायनामिक्स है वो कॉम्प्लेक्स है। दूसरा ये कि वर्कर्स को ऑर्गेनाइज करने के कॉम्पिटिशन ही है कई फोर्सेस के बीच और इसकी वजह से काफ़ी कुछ दिक्कतें हैं। दूसरे बहुत सारे लोगों का ख्याल ये है कि भारत अभी भी एक डेमोक्रेटिक स्टेट है और एक किस्म का सुजन के लिए एक बात करने के लिए बाद एक दीवार खड़ी हो जाती है कि यहाँ पर अभी भी डेमोक्रेसी है, जबकि मुख्य तौर पर न्यूलिबरल पॉलिसीज की अपनाती है यहाँ की। दूसरा जो है हमास और हिजबुल्लाह के बारे में ये है कि हमास से मुस्लिम ब्रदरहुड के जो संबंध है वो ठीक, जैसे एक बार मुस्लिम ब्रदरहुड ने ही हमास और इजराइल के बीच में कुछ समझौता कराया था। दूसरे कि हिजबुल्लाह के साथ मुस्लिम ब्रदरहुड के जो संबंध है वो उतने अच्छे नहीं है, क्योंकि ये सुन्नी और शिया का जो मुस्लिम ब्रदरहुड है वो सुन्नी के यहाँ we would like to thank Suzanne Adley for the talk and for the questions. And I would like to end by a quotation of Mao. During the Great Britain Cultural Revolution, Mao said that it's not final, it's not yet decided who has won, capitalist or the proletariat, and that it would take a series of revolutions to decide who is the final, who emerges as the final winner. And the subsequent 50 to 60 years is going to be full of upheaval around the world. And we are still in that range of 50 to 60 years, marginally ahead, but it's quite true. So we are still
50 to 100.
2036. So yeah, we are still in that range, and it's only through that particular idea that we can move forward. So on that note, thank you. So that's the end of today's program. And चाय बाहर लॉबी में है, बाकी की बात